Hey, welcome to Echo Essentials Podcast. We are on location at the Home and Garden Expo, brought to you by the North Bay Home Builders Association, and we're at booth 58. I'm Scott Clark.
I'm Dave Dale.
And we've been here all weekend long. It's been a great event. We've met lots of people. It's awesome getting to meet many of the people that watch and listen to our podcast.
Really good feedback from a lot of people that are very interested. And then people that haven't heard about it yet, now they're like, oh, I wish I would have known. And now they do, right? So it's cool.
And I think it's just more than anything else, we got to do some outreach. We have to, engage people. And just, there was a woman at our booth just a second ago who was like, how do you download the podcast? Like she's seen Small Town Times on YouTube. Now she's trying to dip her toe into figuring out how to download podcasts. So we're teaching people how to do that, how simple it is. And for anybody, you just simply go to NorthBayEcho.ca, and that gets you started, because you can actually listen or view podcasts from our website, but also to link you up to your newsletter. And the newsletter curates the news around the area, gets you started, and also links you back to the podcast as well. Here I think is the biggest moment of the show. And it happened on Friday. And I couldn't see me. I was like at a distance. Dave's sitting in our booth. Our mayor, Peter Chirico, walked by and waved at Dave, and Dave waved back. I went up to the mayor afterwards. I said, we're making progress. You guys just acknowledged that you're both on the same planet again. Like, this was good.
I think it was an accidental wave, and he didn't realize it was me until halfway through. That's what I think. But it's cool, right?
I think it's progress, Dave.
It's progress.
Progress. One day we're going to get the mayor on the show, and he's going to come in here, and we're going to ask questions and have fun, and we'll laugh together and run through a meadow.
You do live in a fantasy world. I love it.
Do you think the mayor will ever come on? He's not happy with you.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I like how you do that. Yeah, I understand.
There's a group of them.
Oh, it isn't just him. There's a few.
I've been doing this 35 years.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that I think he's at the top of the list of the people that just don't want to talk to me right now or ever more.
Do you have regrets? Is there any column or something you've done where you went, if I could go back, I wish I could have done that differently. I wish I could have approached it differently.
Yeah, there are.
Anything you can share with us, or?
I haven't done anything like that recently.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. That was really good. I see what you did there. The few that there's very few that I know. But you've always stepped up and if you felt you crossed the line, you've always apologized. The double-edged sword to that is, like, it's too late. It's out there already, but you came back and you said, look, maybe I should have done something a little bit different. But I think all of us as broadcasters, do you think now, with social media and everything today, do you think if you started your career now, you'd be canceled?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. I wouldn't have survived the learning period of how to sort of filter a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't have survived that. I was very outrageous.
Do you think when you were younger, you were most... what period? I remember you said to me one time, it said, Scott, there was a rough period I had. Like, you had surgeries done, and there was all sorts of stuff going through. I think you were going through your first marriage. There was a lot. Like, that's a lot of stuff going on, right? And some of that stuff pours out onto the page too, right?
Yeah, there's about 2 years, 2007, 2008, that I just would like to have a redo on totally.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because I don't remember much of it. It was too much of the opioid and all the other emotional stuff.
Yeah, I think about when I went through a divorce, and I was on the air at the time. I'm sure it bled through certain things, at a certain time. And I don't know how it was, like, when I look back at it, like, emotionally, all the stuff you go through that, like, even if it's like a good separation, it's still emotionally draining. And then we do our jobs, and it's like, how did I get through that? Like, without, like, losing my marbles on air or yelling at people or whatever it happens to be, you know?
Well, it's interesting when you go through those type of things. Like you end up growing an empathy bone for other people and realizing.
Do you have empathy?
I got one little like a callus.
Okay,
I got an
can't
empathy
wait to
callus.
see it.
Yeah, but you understand that everybody is going through shit.
Yeah.
You don't know the shit they're going through.
It's so true as you get older, right?
Right. A little bit of maturity, but a little bit of awareness, and a little bit less likely to immediately write someone off just because they're having a bad day. Mm-hmm. And I guess you learn that by knowing your own weaknesses and your own troubles. So it makes you a more rounded person. It's unfortunate we don't learn that earlier in life, I'd say. And some people are born with it. Some people are very empathetic. Some people are very understanding and not non-judgmental, either the way they're raised or the DNA. But for a lot of people, you end up growing up confused about the whole sort of situation, all different levels, right?
So it was interesting that there was a woman that came to our booth here when we were getting set up ready to go, and she was saying, "Oh, I've seen a couple of your podcasts and really like them." Said, "You have to get more politicians on and corner them," or I forget what she said. "You got to really stick it to them." She said, "You'll have so many listeners." I don't think that's our goal.
To have many listeners?
Well, to have many listeners, yes, but it's like, I guess, like if you did that, people wouldn't come on and see us, right? People would feel, I don't want to go on, or else we're going to get it. I'm going to get a gotcha kind of moment, right?
Well, I want to be able to achieve that interest level without being the gotcha and clickbaitish of how you treat the interview after you do the interview. Mm-hmm. And I want us to have the reputation that we're going to ask sometimes hard questions, but give somebody an opportunity to explain themselves and not just try to cancel them, not to make them look bad and not just pound into it, but give them an honest opportunity to articulate their side, but while still being able to put them in the corner in an uncomfortable position to explain themselves.
Do you think things have changed? Like I've found over the last little while, and maybe because the resources have been pulled out of all the different media outlets locally, and please, I hope that doesn't come across the wrong way to the media outlets that are listening to us. I just know that they don't have the same resources. Like I remember when I worked at Rogers, so we had 40-something employees. In our newsroom, there had to be about, I would say there's close to 10 people in that newsroom. I don't think, nobody has 10 people in the newsroom anymore.
Nobody.
How many people did you have in the newsroom when you were at the Nugget?
Well, when I got there, we had 21 people with managers and reporters. They had a high peak of 36, I think, 38 at one point. Yeah.
So today, what is it? It's Greg and Jennifer, right? Anybody else?
Rocco.
Oh, Rocco does
well,
stuff?
He works for them as far as the federally funded program where they share news with the other outlets. So he covers the South, Powassan, South River, and a few other things. Mm-hmm. A Bay to Day's employee like that, David Briggs, he covers Mattawa, West Nipissing, and School Board. And then whatever David does, the Nugget and other outlets can use it, and whatever Rocco does, Bay to Day can use it.
Because you monitor it really close. So in this sharing economy that we're hoping that we can be part of and help grow, is the sharing economy when it comes to that type of journalism working? Are they sharing David's stories, or is David stuck? I shouldn't say stuck. Is David strictly with Bay Today, or do other outlets use David's stories?
Oh no, any outlet that's involved with this program, the local, can't remember the what the acronym is, but local investigative journalism or something like that. LJI, yeah. So anybody involved with the LJI program, any outlet, they can use each other's stuff. So the Star was, I was that guy for the Bay Today for about 6 months. Mm-hmm. When I was doing stories about West Nipissing and their council being totally in disarray, or Mattawa having some investigative, the Toronto Star is picking up all those stories, and any other paper. So they sharing economy. Well, that was just a forced thing through the federal government program, right? But I think that is the way. A little bit more use of each other's content. That's going to have to be the way if they're not going to have enough journalists to create their own content. So they're going to have to make deals like and work with people like ourselves, and we're going to be working with them. I think that's the way it's going to go.
What should we be covering in the next little bit? Who would we like to get in here besides the mayor?
Besides the mayor,
yeah. Well, we're just going to keep putting that out there. See if the mayor.
Well, I'd really like to have Erica Lougheed on and have her talk about the school board stuff because it doesn't seem right there.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I'd like to see her on.
Have we asked her?
Well, I sent her an email and I said she can come on and talk about the school board or the Chippewa renaming or Amelia Risen, where she's the director there, executive. And I didn't get a response, so I didn't know whether she got it or not.
Okay,
but I haven't.
We'll keep trying though, right?
Yeah, I'm going to keep trying. And then there's other people like that too.
Yeah. Those are kind of like some of the interesting little meaty things like that are going on. But what are some of the things that we would like to sort of like peel back the onion on that we haven't had a chance to in the last little while when it comes to, I don't know if it's the development of the city or the economy or maybe economic development. Why is it like, so we hear the narrative about, the city's open for business and come here and this is a beautiful place to work and that, but I would love to know, like, what is it that drives like a decent sized business, right, to come here, say we're going to move our shop here and this is where we're going to, plant our flag? Because that must be that type of thing that economic development does in the city. That would take, I would think, years to make things like that come to fruition. But because they're always cloaked in secrecy, but it's confidentiality, right? So if someone comes to them and they can't share that information with anyone because it's confidential, and that's part of the agreement they sign with these different businesses, right? So it's hard to know what's going on.
I guess, just to wrap it up, I'd say what we should be doing is nibbling around the edges of these issues, and if we can't get the official people to explain them, talk to the people that are on the peripheral. For example, for economic development, one of the big issues they have is the labor force. Huge. Labor force is huge. If no companies come in here until they know there's a labor force that's trained and ready and willing to work, right? Same for the other thing they look at is taxes and the water bills and land, right? So it's pretty basic. So if you break them all down into those different issues, I think we can do a job that way.
Sure.
Hey, how you doing, Dirk? Well, we should just name people when they walk by. Yeah.
The Shogrens are here.
Shogrens are here. They walk by. Isn't that Canadian Tire great?
Love that Canadian Tire.
I love that Canadian Tire. I like the app where you can find things now.
You don't have to talk to people. That's why you like it. I like it. Hey, Steve.
Yeah, can you show me where the screw is?
Yeah. That's the thing. I think one of the magic of Algonquin Home Hardware is you can go in and say, I need this screw. Canadian Tire, even though they have lots of them, it's usually a younger kid and stuff like that, and can't always find it. I'll take it to the screw department. You go to...
Well, that's why they have that app now. They're trying to compete with Home Hardware on Algonquin because they got the service, right? But they got it in people power.
You ever go down to the basement in Algonquin Home Hardware, and then I don't know the woman's name. It's is it matriarch or is that it? Yeah, the matriarch of the business.
Yeah,
she's down there. How can I help ya? She's right by the fireplace. They have a fireplace there. She's sitting reading a book.
It's nice.
How can I help ya? I love this town.
Yeah, that's cool.
I love it.
Yeah. So with that said, Scott, I'm looking forward to a little bit more with Bev Hillier, talking about the issues that we got into with her, which did cover economic development, really.
It was really good. She's super, super smart.
Today we have Bev Hillier from the city. She's I call her the chief planner, but she's actually, her title is Manager of Planning and Building Services.
She's a big deal.
Welcome, Bev.
Thank you for having me.
Finally, we got some intelligence in the room. Finally. Beverly's here. Bev or Beverly?
Either one's fine.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. I'm good.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the Trout Lake management study. You have listened to our interview with Liza Vandermeer of the Trout Lake Conservation Association. And so we're going to start there, but we're going to talk about some other building issues as well, development stuff. But what did you think of our interview? And is there anything that pops out that you really want to address off the bat?
Yeah, so I think just in general, thank you for giving me the opportunity to listen to it before I came. And so I think the biggest thing is just sort of talking about why we're doing the study, sort of the process that we've gone through to date, and sort of what the next steps are in terms of both the decision from the City of North Bay and the municipality of East Ferris in terms of, bringing some of that information back and what that looks like for the community too.
It's one of the things I took away from that interview was about the decisions you have to make, or in your job, you follow the bylaws, how it's laid out, and not just here, but provincial laws, federal laws, and municipal laws. And it's really interesting. She was asking for, there just needs to be more research in what's done, or a third party that's going to look at these studies that are going to say, yeah, this is where it is, and we could potentially do better. How is that challenging for your job when it seems like the resources on the provincial side, there isn't as many people doing the studies on lakes and streams that there once was? How difficult is that for you to do your job?
Yeah, so just maybe process-wise. So the city back in 1988 did a lake management plan. That was the last lake management plan that was done for Trout Lake. And then based on that plan, the city, through the official plan, put a lot freeze on Trout Lake that said no more development. We'll review the policies again in about 5 years. That review didn't really happen, although we ended up in, as Dave and I were talking just before the interview about the previous OMB decisions and sort of planning applications that had happened related to Trout Lake in the early 2000s, it sort of shifted the way that the policy approach happened through the official plan. And so we've been sort of in a bit of a status quo policy place for 30 plus years. And so we've realize that it's time to take a review of the land use planning policies and the work that goes behind that, which is sort of what we're at right now, which is the background study and the science that goes behind that policy development. And so the Ministry of Environment actually did a lake capacity model for Trout Lake in 2018, and they gave that to us and said the model doesn't work for us because the assumptions that the Ministry of Environment has is that 100% of the phosphorus that comes from the septic system goes directly into the lake. And so as Brent Parsons, who's our environmental expert through Hutchison Environmental Services, as we went through the public meetings and whatnot, and he explained that that's not really what happens. And so the model doesn't work because if you assume 100% of the phosphorus goes to the lake, the model overpredicts the amount of phosphorus that enters into Trout Lake by more than 20%, which means that the model then is unreliable for the purpose of using it for planning policy development. And so we found ourselves in a space just like East Ferris did, which is we then don't have something to help to provide the background and the science to develop policies and provide some guidance to people about what they can do on the lake in terms of lot creation or just general development on their properties. So we had to go and do something. So which is why we then, as a city and jointly with East Ferris, and the Conservation Authority is actually part of that committee too. They've been part of our conversations all the way along and part of our meetings, our RFP development. They've been on the steering committee. And so we've been doing this jointly with the three groups to move forward to get the science we need to help support the policy development. And so there has been a lot of work that's happened in the background, and the ministry has done some of the work in the past, but it hasn't then provided us with the information we need to actually create policy and use it as a sort of sound resource to rely on when we get in a space where, council ultimately has to sort of defend those policies and the planning decisions that they're making.
It must be interesting too, because is Trout Lake treated differently? Because Trout Lake is the water supply for the city of North Bay and, of course, all the people that live on it as well. Is it treated differently?
What do you mean treated differently?
Is the building laws on Trout Lake different than they would be as for, let's say, Lake Nipissing?
So yes, they are. So there's a little bit. There's a stricter policies for development on Trout Lake, including things like enhanced vegetative buffers, septic system setbacks, lot sizes, those sorts of things, because of their rural nature. Most of, if not all of the properties on Lake Nipissing are all serviced by municipal water and sewer services as well. So that's sort of where the difference lies.
Right. So so the approach in building, that's all taken into account.
Yes.
And is it challenging also? So Nipissing and Trout Lake are interesting because it's different municipalities that are touching it.
Yes. Yep.
And they would all have different policies, would they not?
Right. And so that's one of the goals through this, is where we jointly worked with the municipality of East Ferris. So today, the municipality of East Ferris, in their official plan and their zoning bylaw, has different rules for development on Trout Lake than the city of North Bay does. And so, about a third, maybe more than a third of the lake is in East Ferris Township, or municipality of East Ferris, and the rest is in North Bay. And so what we're really trying to do is make sure that there's a consistent approach to development on the lake, because it is a whole lake. The lake doesn't care that there's municipal boundaries that are involved. And so how do we come up with policies that work for both municipalities that represent sort of the best approach for lake development?
Because you're way smarter than me, Beverly. So so in what you said in the first comment is the city moving forward and East Ferris in providing what the Trout Lake Conservation Group is looking for, like a third-party audit?
So no, we haven't proposed to move forward with a peer review of it. Only because there's a couple of things that have happened. So historically, the to date sort of lot creation on Trout Lake. So there's been there's a lot of history, of course, in terms of what's happened on the lake over a number of years that's driven sort of planning policy development. In 2003, 2005, there was an OMB decision for the North Shore subdivision that resulted at the time that the Ministry of Environment came back and said, there's actually 43 lots that you can develop on Trout Lake. We redid the model at that time, and you can get 43 lots. So at the time, that got split again because East Ferris and North Bay sort of jointly share the lake. 20 of those lots went to East Ferris. 23 of them came to the city of North Bay through what we called limited lot creation policy that said you can develop on the lake. The city took the approach to say that if we were going to have this lot capacity, the city could have said at the time, cool, we're just going to let 20 lots be created, no additional policies, just as long as they're the right size, you can just go develop just like anybody else would. The city took the approach that said, okay, let's use this as a learning opportunity to figure out what's happening on the lake to try and have the least amount of impact as possible. So each one of those lots in North Bay, it's different in East Ferris. So for out of those 23 lots, each one of them, as they develop, are required to go through very specific things in terms of increased setbacks for septic systems. Each of the property owners is required to enter into a site plan control agreement with the city, which requires them they pay for monitoring of their septic system for a 5-year period. The city goes and does the monitoring, but the property owner pays annually a fee to the city to have their septic system monitored to ensure that it's doing its phosphorus retention in the way that the study said that it could do. So of those 23, 12 of them have developed and are either sampled or currently under sampling. So a bunch of them are still vacant and haven't had any development on them, but 12 of them are either have been sampled or currently in sampling because they've just been constructed in the last few years. So of those ones, there's monitoring that's been done on them. The other ones, again, just don't have development on them yet, but they would be required to go through the same thing when the time comes.
So it's pretty stringent. If you're going to build,
yes,
you'll have to use the most advanced techniques that we know today to make sure that everything is safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then some of that research that was done, so using that work that was done to monitor each one of those septic systems to see how they're actually doing in terms of their phosphorus reduction, to make sure that it's not all going to the lake, and how's that actually working. So we have that information on each one of these developments. There's been a phosphorus reduction plan that's been done by a consultant who, again, has used sort of the same. Some of them, it's been a different consultant who has done work related to that, who's used similar scientific research and evidence to build the case for the lot creation that's happened. So using that, plus we know that the Ministry of Environment did this work in 2018 already. And using the model the way that the Ministry of Environment uses it, which is, again, that 100% of the phosphorus goes to the lake, we've hired an expert in the field to go do that lake modeling for us and find an approach that works for North Bay. So there's a lot of evidence to support the work that's been done so far.
Is it hard for, I'll say, contractors? So I don't know any of the contractors that did these independent studies, and I'm assuming they were hired by the city?
For which ones? Like the previous developments or the...
What you were talking about, these independent surveys that were done or that you had assessments done?
Yeah, so for the lot creation applications, the developers hired their own or the property owners hired their own consultants. We had some of that work peer reviewed at the time, plus we've hired Hutchison to do this work with us now.
So how hard is it for those consultants when the mantra for the city for a number of years has been, we're building, and we're going to hire you to tell us whether we could build here? That must be hard for them, but...
Yeah, so when it's the private sector, I mean, they all have a professional responsibility to make sure that you're providing good, sound advice, not only to their client, but as a expert in their field moving forward in terms of doing the work that they do. Just like we have I have a professional responsibility as a registered professional planner, providing advice to council that, council then ultimately can make the decision. So the space we found ourselves in is that our land use planning policies, which is ultimately between the provincial policy statement and our official plan, the two major policy documents that council uses to make decisions on land use planning policy. So in 2003, 2005, we ran through that in our official plan at the time. And then in 2011, we had another application for lot creation on 4 Mile Lake, which then, 4 Mile Creek goes into 4 Mile Bay. And so it's part of the Trout Lake watershed. And through that OMB decision at the time, there was a number of lots that were created through that decision where, council at the time said, no, we don't want lot creation. Our policy says no. And so we're not supporting the lot creation. The applicants appealed those to the Ontario Municipal Board at the time, and the end result was lot creation. And so we find ourselves, and council finds itself in a space where the land use planning policies are not holding up when they're tested at an Ontario Municipal Board or now Ontario Land Tribunal situation. And so the alternative to doing nothing and not doing any studies or not moving forward with updating our policies is that the private sector proponent, developer, drives the development on the lake, because our experience has told us that when we go to these Ontario Land Tribunal or Ontario Municipal Board hearings, is that the lots get approved. And so we find ourselves in a space where we need to create policies that are up to date and reflective based on current and up to date
science. Super interesting. Can I just for me to digest that a little bit more? So, and I'm sure this happens because I read about it. I've in city council when someone comes up and it goes through a tribunal, and so so we could as a region municipality have say, hey, we're not building because this is what we believe. But a builder can come and say, I want a lot here, and it's like, nope, that's not our policy. And then you go to the tribunal and say, well, based on your weak policy, they're building there, even though the municipality said, well, we didn't really want that, so they can overturn it, right?
They can, yeah.
That's so that. And could a municipality stop them? Like, if they stop someone like that, then I guess they could sue, right? Like.
Yeah, so the Ontario Land Tribunal, their job is to also take into consideration, official plan policy, provincial policy statement, zoning bylaw, rules and regulations, and then they listen to experts. So there'll be expert witnesses that go before them, and they take all of this information and then ultimately make a decision. And they're also supposed to make decisions that are just like council, in conformity with official plan, in conformity with or consistent with the provincial policy statement, and is appropriate development for the area. And so, but they take all of that information into consideration. So, based on, again, our past experience, is that the policies that we have in place are not holding up to the test of time. And so it's time to take a review of that and update them. And so we haven't got to that stage yet. And I guess in terms of process-wise, there was a conversation about a public consultation and sort of what that approach has been to public consultation. And so when we did the background study work, there was 4 open houses, so 2 in North Bay and 2 in East Ferris. Plus, we were at the East Ferris trade show one of the years, and we had a number of meetings with various stakeholders and whatnot to help inform those documents. And so the document that the initial document that came out versus the document that ultimately was approved by council was updated and addressed based on that. And then now with the direction from both the City of North Bay and the Council for East Ferris, we'll move into a policy creation stage, which then involves a whole other round of public consultation to actually talk about what those policies actually mean and how they get developed and what it means to be implemented. Because until you start talking about that stuff, sometimes people don't necessarily, maybe they don't pay attention to the background study piece, but once it's like the on the ground, what does this policy development, when you actually read the policy, mean to me and my individual property?
This is the North Bay Echo Community Podcast Network. I'm Scott Clark.
I'm Dave Dale.
And we want to invite you to be part of this network. We know there's some great podcasters out there that would love like a studio like this to do their show from, or maybe you just want to promote it on our network. We want to encourage people to do that.
I'm talking to a gentleman tomorrow who has his own business podcast going on. I listened to about 7 of the episodes. Great stuff. I'm hoping to put him on the network. He wants to grow this to a provincial podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we can do something for him.
And I think, one of the motivating factors for us, Dave was in journalism for 30 years. I was in broadcasting for a number of decades as well. And we're seeing, and everybody else is seeing in the news today, how we're getting obliterated as far as these smaller markets in the voices that are being diminished. So the Echo Network is really about local voices being heard, and we're encouraging people to join us, be on the network, and learn more. How can they find out more information, Dave?
Well, they can contact me, editor at NorthBayEcho.ca, and I'll fill them in on the opportunity.
Great title and great haircut, Dave Dale. I find this all so fascinating, right? Like you think, well, this is fairly simple, and let's make a decision and that. But there's so many layers to everything that goes into, and not just building on Trout Lake, but building anywhere, right? Any type of land, and how it can be challenged at different times. A municipality can be challenged. So even though we might have our elected officials there, that they're going to, sometimes they can't because it gets challenged in court. So hence why strong policies, make for good municipalities, I guess.
Yeah.
So the TLCA was suggesting that there be a peer review of it. They're not quite sure or confident of the science involved that led to the recommendations. Why wouldn't you have it peer reviewed?
We're not opposed to it. The idea is that I'm just not, based on all the we haven't seen the necessity for it in terms of the work previously that's been done by the Ministry of Environment. I know that the previous request was we'll send it to the Ministry of Environment. They'll do the peer review for free, essentially. But the Ministry of Environment takes a different approach in terms of utilizing their model. So the end result of that is going to be similar to the study that they did in 2018, which said the model doesn't work, right? Like because it overestimates the amount of phosphorus that would come to the lake.
And the monitoring of the 12 lots of the 23 that were approved for North Bay back in 2005, I think it is. What did that tell you about the new technology for the septic systems?
Yeah, so the new lots that have monitored, some of them are on those 12 lots, some of them are on 4 Mile Lake in terms of that other one. So they're not all in the same area. Most of those ones have seen between 86 to 97%. So a couple of the samples has come back as 100% phosphorus removal at the monitoring wells. And so what that's telling us is that the phosphorus is getting attenuated, is absorbed in the soil and treated in the septic system before it gets even remotely close to the lake, because those septic systems are also set back 30 meters from the lake. So that's not testing at the water's edge, it's testing at the septic system. And so then it has another 100 feet before it gets to the water, where the soil and vegetative buffers and those sorts of things would absorb that as well.
Couple councillors in East Ferris were thinking about having it reviewed as well. They brought it up. I'm not sure where they sit now. Having somebody do peer review, wouldn't it be similar to the West Ferris Arena, where assumptions were made, but people weren't convinced necessarily of its early demise? So to get ahead of the game, so that this isn't a lingering issue, what would it cost to have something like that peer reviewed?
I don't know. And I can't comment on the West Ferris Arena comment, obviously, but in terms of doing a peer review like this piece done, I'm not entirely sure what the cost would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sometimes it's easier to get ahead of these things and having a lingering question mark in people's minds. Now, the TLCA Liza was telling us she attended the public meetings, but I think she said that she didn't see a lot reflected in the report from what they were trying to highlight. Is that true? I didn't look to make sure.
Yeah, so the reports have been updated every time we've had some public consultation. So there's been entire sections added about, climate change, or there was questions even from council about different things that the report's gone back and been revised to make sure that those areas are very clear. So there is no, sometimes you see in consultants' report where there'll be a whole appendices of just like, here's sort of verbatim the things we heard at public meetings. That's not included, but that's not to say that it's not included in the report itself. There's just no appendice of here's a picture of the comments we got at the public meeting.
The climate change thing was another thing that they brought up, because we don't know exactly what's the impact of warmer weather will have on Trout Lake. We can make some assumptions based on what happens in other areas. How is that reflected in the planning and policy making, that things might get a little bit different here weather-wise?
Yeah, so I think it's really important first of all, the background study is really that initial stage of work that we're at. The consultants recognized that as well and said, as much as the phosphorus, so the phosphorus level of the lake has, trended downward, which is great over, the past number of years, like in terms of the lake health. And so the lake's getting healthier. So that's great. We don't want to be in a situation where we're getting the lake in, nobody's goal is to see a worse lake for the city. And so how do you manage that in a way that allows for, some development, again, based on the science that's there, that does say that there actually is some lot capacity, but doing it in a very cautious and incremental way. So we haven't developed policy yet, and we're not at that stage yet, but there was some recommendations in the work that was done by the consultants that said, you should really only consider doing like 20% of the amount of lots, for instance, that could be created. Then you stop, right? So just like creak the door open a tiny little bit, let a little bit change, see how it's working, because your current policies and the current approach isn't working. So let a little bit change. Then stop, monitor, study, do the model again, check to see where things are at. If things have changed a little bit, close the door, right? And just say, okay, the work that's happened, the monitoring that's happened, before you just like open the floodgates to let everything happen. That's nobody's goal in terms of the end result, is to just let anything happen. It just slow, tiny, incremental steps to do a little bit, check, pause, study again, do the monitoring. If things show that they're trending downwards or they're doing great, maybe creak it open a little bit more. If it doesn't, close the door and before you've just, again, sort of let the floodgates happen.
One more thing about the monitoring. When Liza was suggesting that when you're making your policies, that anybody developing a lot, like who pays for the monitoring and where's that cost coming from? But also, the other part of that, there's a lot of old septic systems on Anita and other areas of the North Shore, and both probably. And people say that the city hasn't been enforcing the regulations that we do have for septic systems and old ones.
So for new septic systems on the lake, so I'll talk about the 23 lots that were allowed to be created back in 2005. They each one of those ones, as they develop, are required to enter into a site plan control agreement with the city. Each property owner provides security to the city, $10,000 in security, plus they pay an annual fee to have the city go and monitor their septic system. So we go out 3 times a year and take samples in the spring, summer, and fall, and then we get those sampled and then have that data related to
and
those.
That's like a 5-year.
It's a 5-year, yeah. And so we have those ones in terms of the data that we're directly collecting. We also partner with the Conservation Authority to go out and do monitoring of the lake itself, and so we have a partnership with them where they go out and do the monitoring. The city pays for that, both through, levying that the Conservation Authority does to the municipality, but also through, an agreement we have related to getting that work done. And so there is, again, we tend to get caught up in the conversation around lot creation because it is the part that people are obviously very interested in terms of what happens, but there are a total of 28 different recommendations that come out of both the background studies by the consultants. And some of those things are increasing monitoring. So making sure that you're monitoring for different things on the lake as well. And so that would be part of the plan. And it would be part of our agreement with the Conservation Authority. And again, they've been part of this process the entire way along.
So do we monitor the old septic systems on a regular basis?
So the Conservation Authority, we have it's a voluntary septic inspection program that they have where over the course of the year, they go out and do a number of properties and go inspect to make sure that they're not failing. And so there's sort of a two-pronged approach. And again, one is so it goes back a little bit to source water protection, drinking water source protection. I know you talked a little bit about Walkerton and Clean Water Act and those sorts of things. There are some areas of our larger jurisdiction where septic systems are considered a significant threat to drinking water, and that there needs to be very specific monitoring programs are in place in terms of mandatory septic inspections. Trout Lake's not one of those. The phosphorus from septic systems is not considered a significant threat to the drinking water source for Trout Lake. And so it's not mandatory septic reinspection under the Building Code Act, but the Conservation Authority does have a voluntary system that they put in place where they go and do inspections across the lake to check to see how systems are working.
Well, wouldn't we want to make it non-voluntary for old systems that are right on the Bay of Delaney, drinking water of Trout Lake?
So there are portions of Delaney Bay that are actually on municipal services. So those are not ones that are on septic. Over in the Birch Haven Lake Heights
area?
and Birch Haven area are on municipal services. The other ones, again, voluntary septic system, because it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory by legislation. We don't have the authority to force people into a required sort of mandatory 5-year review of their septic system. But that's where, again, that voluntary program that the city and the Conservation Authority works through to make sure that there is that reinspection of septic systems that's happening so that they are, the failing ones are adequately addressed.
Double-edged sword, as if you were on a septic system and it was like, well, I believe most would want to know how their septic system is doing. But if it's failing, what's that, a $30,000, $30,000 proposition to get it all fixed up, potentially? It's like, so I can see why it's like, I want to know, but I don't want to know. But it's all so important. And there could be a time, that if things got bad, let's just say, or there was the needle moved in the way we didn't want it to move, where the Ministry of Environment or whatever would come in and say, look, everybody gets a mandatory one now. And so I'm assuming that would happen. If that's our drinking water source, it would have to happen, right?
So it would have to be based right now, the way that it works, it would have to be based through the source water protection plan and the risk assessment and vulnerability score that the North Bay drinking water system has. So there's intake protection zones related to the source water protection system, and based on its vulnerability score and risk assessment, there's actually very little things that are considered significant threats to the drinking water source in North Bay, and septic systems are not one of them. So it would take a change to, and I say septic systems, by that I mean phosphorus. It would take a change to that, those drinking water threats and the scores related to the city's drinking water intake to make that a mandatory program right now.
If that happened, if that ever happened, and don't wish that ever to
happen.
Well,
and that's the goal, of course, through making sure that there's a plan and careful, thought out approach to any changes that are happening on the lake.
You have other questions? Because I have a couple of questions for not pertaining to lot.
There was one comment I wanted to make just because you mentioned the intake protection zones, right? Yeah. And I've been trying to figure out what the terminology was for that for a while, because I keep saying that as far as the city's drinking water goes, they only really need to worry about around Delaney Bay because everything's flowing east.
On the other way.
Right? That's my own personal sort of observation. So you'd have to be worried about people who have intakes from the lake downstream from Delaney Bay, right?
Yeah, so the Clean Water Act relates to the municipal drinking water source, right? Yeah. So not to individual private services. And so there was a lot of work that happened in 2005, 2010 related to assessment reports and vulnerability scoring and work to determine sort of the risk associated to very prescribed drinking water threats in the Clean Water Act to figure out what was an issue for North Bay and our drinking water and what wasn't. And so we use that. Those policies are implemented in our official plan and reviewed annually with the Source Protection Authority.
Dave, I have a question for you, actually. I'm curious how many people on Trout Lake, so I make some assumptions, right? It'd be like, I guess everybody on Trout Lake would want, I want this pristine, I want everything, this is my source of water, and it's a massive investment they've made for the properties that they own there, right? But I don't think that's the case, because I remember during the Jean-Marc Filion days, there was a few friends that I was like, I can't cut down one tree without getting, summoned or whatever it happened to be, right? So there was a lot of, at that time, discord when it came to that. But in some of the research you've done, are most people part of the Trout Lake Conservation Group, or is it a small group? Is it a...
It's my understanding of it. Maybe I don't know the exact numbers. I'm guessing it's a medium-sized group as far as Trout Lake goes, because not everybody would be involved with it. There are people that don't like rules or regulations and anybody else telling them what to do. So how many people would be involved with? I don't know. Good question.
It's just that, like, that's because when you said that, you're right. If we're monitoring that pristine part of the lake, it's probably in a good place because water flows that way. But most of the properties are down that way, right?
Well, I got schooled. The last time I mentioned that, someone schooled me and says, "Hey, I do an intake from in front of my property for my water, so all of it counts as far as I'm concerned, as far as protecting it goes." And I told him to go drill a well. But it's.
And the monitoring happens. The monitoring that's being done in terms of the trending phosphorus and that sort of thing is happening throughout the lake and inflowing streams. And so this policy not only applies to Trout Lake, but also to all the major inflowing streams to Trout Lake, including 4 Mile Lake coming into the lake. So
we have Clark Communications. We have a client called Wall Water. They're based out on Manitoulin Island, and we're learning lots about them. And they do a lot of water testing and that for wells and things like that, right? And especially in rural in Northern Ontario. It's fascinating when he shares information about how few people ever test their water. And if you're on a well, it's not the city's or the municipality's job to test your water. It's like you can get it tested through the health unit, but it's really the owner's job. And what he was saying is many owners just don't want to know, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, that's your That's your drinking water. And then, when people are buying and selling, very few people test the water before they buy that home. And it's almost like you see no evil, hear no evil, right? And it's like people almost don't want to know that this is all going on. So I appreciate that all of you are doing that work, right? And I appreciate that the Conservation Authority is like challenging some of that too, right? Saying, hey, like...
the association, yeah.
Yeah, the association, sorry. Yeah, that is challenging it as well. I have a question that probably pertains more to most of the people in North Bay.
Okay. Can I say one thing first, which is just about the, you talked a little bit about, getting tattled on about a tree being cut down. So I do just want to clarify too that if somebody has a concern about something and they file a complaint with the city, while yes, some of our forms do talk about frivolous and vexatious complaints, in my time with the city, we have never, that I'm ever aware of, charged somebody for filing a complaint with the city in terms of a fee or something like that. And so certainly if somebody has a complaint and they need to file it with the city, like, please do so. That's what we're there for. And we'll certainly take a look into it. If there's somebody who, that's there for, I guess, the very rare case of somebody using that as a tool to just sort of consistently and constantly, maybe complain about one particular issue that they, on one particular individual or one particular property, sort of over and over in a way that we've said, okay, we've dealt with the complaint. We've, whatever the situation is, that then they just don't stop, that there's that tool is there. But in my time with the city, we've never done that. And so I don't think nobody should be concerned about having to call the city to file a complaint if they need to, related to something that's happening, whether it's Trout Lake or anywhere else in the city.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because, there was a time when I lived in Pinewood and didn't have lots of money and things like that. I wouldn't get a building permit for certain things, right? And that's wrong. And the city actually knocked on my door to rectify that, by the way, because I was on the radio and I talked about it. I didn't say I didn't get a permit. I just said, hey, thanks to Rona for this and that. And I was in the, what are you doing? You never filed anything with us. And then, it's funny how life comes back around, right? So in the home we're in now, it was condemned after we got in because of electrical issues. And those electrical issues, there was no permits taken out. And because no permits were taken out on that home, it was the electrical authority, Ontario Electrical Authority, came and pulled the box off. Our house was condemned, and we had no recourse when it came to it because permits weren't taken out. And I learned through that, and it was years I had to go through this process, right? But it was years and lots of money. And by the way, the city was great. I went to the city and I asked I need to see permits on this and that. It's like, there's no permits for this, Scott. No permits to this, no permits to that. And I realized for whatever it is, like the $25 or the whatever it is to get the permit, that protects not just you living there, but it protects the homeowners in generations to come, right? And I learned through that process about how important it is to have all of those checks and balances in place and how my family would have been protected and we probably could have saved, there was six figures, well more than six figures that we had to put into. We basically had to tear the house out and rewire the entire house before it could be established it was livable. But because I didn't go through that building permit part, it's tell me why. And maybe I just answered the question, but tell me why that's so important when I build a deck, when I do a little thing that I should have a permit.
Yeah. So the purpose of those things is to make sure that the structure that you're building or the way that you're changing your house or a garage or whatever the situation is that it's done properly so that the health and safety of the individuals, whether it's you or work that you're doing for somebody else is protected over the long term. And so it could be about making sure there's proper railings and that they're secured properly so nobody's falling off of a deck, that the spacing, again, I'm not a building code expert, not a building expert. I oversee the building department, but we have some great staff who are very technical, but at a very high level. That's what that stuff is there for, is to make sure that it's designed properly to carry the right loads of people who are in it, or that your windows and doors or have the right design to them to make sure that they're going to function properly over the long term and that there's going to be no long-term issues.
But there's been over time where I've seen it not that long ago where I was hiring someone to come into the house to do some work in the house, and they said, well, if I get a permit, that's going to cost you more. I'm like, I'm okay with that. But they don't say how much more. They're just saying that it just needs to be inspected. So it might slow a bit of the process down. It never has, because people come and check it really quickly. But just be wary, and this is coming from someone who paid the price. It's like, make sure you get the permit. When a contractor potentially asks you not to get a permit, that's a huge red flag. That's it for me.
And our goal, I think everywhere in the city, but I can really speak to the planning and building department. Our goal is there to help people and facilitate them getting the thing that they need to make their project go smoothly, and to sort of answer any questions that they have, right? We're there as a resource. If you do have a question, if you're moving forward and you go, do I need a permit for this? Do I not? Give us a call. We're happy to answer those questions. And, we have an obligation. It's also like our goal, but we also have an obligation under the Building Code Act that we, respond very quickly, and we go out and coordinate inspections and we get that work done so that we're not holding up projects.
And I'll say also that, my time, I was actually, should I ask the Conservation Authority to come over? Because I was curious about erosion. I'm on Lake Nipissing, and they were fantastic. Like, it's so weird that there was a time where I was always told, oh, don't get the city or Conservation Authority or stuff involved because they're just going to da-da-da-da. I've had a great experience, and they're super helpful. Yes, there's some paperwork, but usually the contractor that's helping knows how to get through it really quickly. But they get to what your goal is, what needs to happen, but they want to do it in a methodical way. And for those buying a home, what's it called? It's an insurance now. They don't go out and check your lot line. Now you buy
title insurance.
Title insurance. So my big thing was a title insurance was made by lawyers for lawyers when my first couple of homes, you had to get someone to lay the lot out. You don't do that anymore. You have title insurance. Everybody buys. So whatever's on title, you're covered under title insurance. So if all the things were taken out, all the building permits were taken out, then title insurance covers you. So I would have been okay. I wouldn't have had 3 years of troubles and all that money. If those permits were taken out and the work wasn't done right, because those permits were taken out, title insurance would have covered me. And because they weren't, that title insurance didn't cover me. It was, and I'm like, oh man, so I'm a big advocate now for making sure you get your permits out.
That's good. Me too.
I still think it's a big tax grab, and they're just trying to increase the value of your home for property taxes. But that's just me.
Yeah, you're a little grumpy that way.
I'm a little bit like that. Now, we've covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate you coming in. Is there one last thing that you wanted to make clear up or provide clarity for while you're here?
That we're at the very early stages of, as much as it feels like we're farther into the process, it really was background work that we're at right now to help sort of inform policy decision. And so we've had a lot of people who have called us and emailed us and asked for some clarification. We've had a ton of sort of one-off conversations with people, even if they haven't come to public meetings or whatever sort of public processes we've had so far. And so there's a lot of people who are interested in what that looks like at a policy stage. And so we will have public consultation as we go through the rest of this. And we really encourage people to be part of it, because, when we develop those policies and when they go before council for their review and decision on what that looks like, that informs, the official plan really sets the framework for decisions that council makes for years to come. And so being involved in that process is really important, because then all future decisions, whether it's just a simple severance application for a lot creation, gets evaluated against what those overarching policies are. And so be part of the process call us, talk to us if you have questions, and we'll happily provide you any information we can, and just be part of the process.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So glad you came in.
So now that we've interviewed Liza Vandermeer for the TLCA, and then we've interviewed Bev Hillier, which we just listened to, with some great insight into their perspective on things. And
I don't understand a lot of it because she's so smart. She uses big words, and I'm like, God.
I knew I saw that you look confused. That's that look.
As soon as you put those big words, a couple of syllables, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, in summary, basically, they haven't got to the policy-making stage, so there's lots of opportunities still for public. And she said that they're probably going to, reading between the lines, they're going to phase it in, any increase in lot development, so that they can monitor it and make changes as they go. So they're not going to just say, 80 to 100 new lots in the the basin area for the Trout Lake. They might start with 20 or 30 and see how it goes. So I think there's a little less things to be concerned about. And then she said, yes, it's very normal for developers and the people that own the homes to pay for the necessary monitoring. So she answered a lot of good questions.
Yeah, I really like it. It was a good interview.
But
really
who
good.
else can we interview about that Trout Lake situation? That's what I'm trying to wonder. If any of the viewers, which perspective do we need next? We got the cities, chief planner. We got the TLCAs. So that's curious. I'm looking forward to the next interview, but I'm not sure who.
Could we dig in a little deep? I would love to see. I know he's passed away, Jean-Marc Fillion, but maybe a member of his family, because it was the whole family that were involved in.
Well, his kids got really involved in, right?
So they did science projects. They won national awards.
That'd be very interesting to see where his kids
they are
ended
now.
up. Yeah,
I'm probably working for them for all I know. They're probably all brilliant scientists.
So let's track down Jean-Marc's kids and see where they're at. Yeah.
So help us. Try and help us find the Fillion family so we can see what they're doing, where they are today, and their whole thoughts on Trout Lake development and what's going on.